I know when this is doing it. We are live. Good morning, good morning. Welcome to day 4, the final day of this week's This Is Burnout campaign. As I've put in my videos this morning, whilst this may be the final day of the campaign, this is absolutely not the final day of having these conversations. These conversations need to continue to happen. If you are watching anything live or you're watching anything on replay, if you have found it useful or helpful, please remember to keep sharing with the hashtag #ThisIsBurnout. We're starting to get a little bit of momentum now with people sharing that, talking about lots of different things and sharing their lessons, learnings and conversations from this week. And my first guest of the final day this morning is Victoria Hall. Victoria, hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for booking a slot and getting involved. Again, I think it's a weird, I'll say weird one, a nicely weird one with you and I, right? I think we were on a Happiness Index webinar last year together, weren't we, with Matt Phelan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there was just something during that conversation that was like, we need to have another chat. And I think we've spoken, twice since then?
Yeah.
But there's definitely some synergy. I think we're both really passionate about we've got to be doing some stuff to keep the conversation going, to keep the work going, to keep the changes going. So I'm excited to see where our conversation goes today. But again, thank you very much for being part of it, because without people being prepared to share their experiences this week, there would be no live streaming, there would be really no campaign. And I think, as I kind of joked yesterday, whilst I would have been able to talk about this for 4 days non-stop on my own, I think everybody else would have, yeah, exactly. But I think the audience and everybody else would be like, oh, it's her again. So I'm grateful for everybody that has kind of is taking part and being prepared to share their story. But before we get into the kind of burnout detail, just give us a little bit of background, Victoria. Like, who are you and what do you do?
Well, that's not that short, actually, but I'll keep it short.
We've got 45 minutes in total. Let's see where we go.
Yeah, my background's a bit varied. So I started my working life in the military as an RAF officer before I retrained as an employment lawyer. So started off really as an operational manager, then moved into sort of managing how employees work in their environments through employment law, but really missed the people side of the work. So focused quite a lot as well on HR, training, coaching. So I have a blended career now of being a lawyer and a trainer and coach.
Yeah. And you like the variety of it, right? I think from the conversations we've had, you like that variety.
Yeah, I do, because I think they all blend together very well. And I don't like putting things in boxes. And with employment law, it can be very technical and very compliance orientated. And at the end of the day, I see it as still affecting people. And I think if you can't understand the human element of how it impacts people, then it's not as effective.
Yeah.
So I like to keep them together. And luckily my background and hopefully my skill set as well has allowed me to do that. But it's vast, anyone who knows employment law and HR as you do will know that's quite a lot.
It is. And I think we forget that sometimes, right? We just think, employment law surely is just, a few policies that people don't read. HR is, all of the policies that people don't read. But there is a lot to it. And I think you're absolutely right. When we put people at the heart of all of that, it is complex, it is far-reaching, it is vast, it can be difficult. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it can be very difficult at times. And as humans, right, our human nature is we never know what's coming next. We never know what we're going to be dealing with.
No, and it's really interesting because in the military, obviously, people were everything. People development was key, as well as it was on a par with technical development. They were valued the same. And when you transition then to being an employment lawyer, people aren't important. And it's a very stark contrast in terms of emphasis. And so, my experience, and I know others might have a different experience, is that, as a lawyer, you are not trained in how to understand, manage and look after people at all. You are just applying facts and rules to situations for clients, but also in the working environment. And, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, but that was part of my burnout experience because I never liked that approach. I never liked losing that human and people aspect to my work. And when you work hard, your work is a lot of your life. So it ended up being a lot of my life. hence the emphasis now on keeping that human element with clients. But again, as a lawyer, I will never go back to being the lawyer I ended up being before my burnout experience.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point as well, is that I think what all of us have realised is the changes or the work that we began to do, the closer that we got to burnout, that was disconnected from really who it is that we are, what's important to us, what we value, all of those sorts of things. There seems to be literally, the closer that we get to burnout, the further away we get from who we are, what's important to us, and what matters.
And that was fundamental for me. I don't, when I look back on it now, I don't recognize the person I was at the end prior to that burnout period, or some of the things I was doing, if I'm honest. Some of the decisions I was making weren't in line with my values, weren't in line with who I am as a person, and were motivated by things I would not do today, and I wouldn't have done, a while ago before this period started. So much happier being the person I am now again.
Yes, and again, I think that's been a common thing. Lots of common threads are coming through the conversations of this week, for sure. So thank you very much for sharing that. And again, I think I spoke to, when was it? Yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, Wednesday. My first guest of the day, yesterday, Rachel Hayth, was RAF. She was an officer in the RAF. And I think had done pretty much the same thing, as she's kind of come out. She's in a much more people-focused role in terms of the work that she's doing. I think she'd said the same in terms of the real emphasis on the development and on the people development and the technical side. And again, I think I was kind of, and we've both worked with corporates, right? I think the real disconnect for a lot of people that go into leadership or management roles may be very good technically, and so we think we want to promote them into a managerial role, but we don't place the same emphasis on technical skills versus leadership and management capabilities. It's like, well, you're good technically and you can just fudge the management stuff. And I think that ultimately is where we're ending up with so many issues and so many people not being supported, managers included, but so many people not being supported in the workplace, because we are promoting technically able people who we're not giving them the support or development when it comes to the people and management side of it.
And I think the problem is there as well. It's a big problem. And again, if you want to compare the military, and hopefully other organisations do this as well, they start that journey very early on. They start it right at the beginning of your career. So you're always learning about management and leadership right from day one, before you need to be a manager or a leader. So by the time you get to that position, a lot of it is there and you've practiced it and you've had time to understand it. Whereas I think in the corporate world, what we tend to do is wait for people to get there, put them on a course and expect them to do it. And that, training is essential, but it's not the fix. It's not going to do it on its own. You need the experience, you need the confidence to go out and try different things, get to understand people. And that doesn't happen after a course. That happens after a period of experience and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we both know a lot of the courses that are available are very kind of cookie cutter, one size fits all, not really looking at everything that's needed in order to do that.
And with burnout as well, and I would say with training and development is, and this is, I think, the biggest thing that's missed from training and development courses, is the first person you have to look at is yourself. And no courses other than the ones hopefully that I do, which I do. And you, I think, as well. I always start with the person first. And if you look at other courses, they start with, how you're going to apply this to other people. Well, you've missed the first essential chunk then. And I think that's the same for me, anyhow, in my experience with the burnout. I had to look at me first. And then look at everything else. I think it is a problem. But I think these sorts of discussions where people can look at their own self, that increase their self-awareness, is a life skill, actually, that you can apply to lots of different situations, not just this topic. So it's
absolutely
great.
And again, it's
this.
not, I don't know if I think based on the conversations that we have had before, again, as few as they have been, I think we're both in agreement that once you start to do that inward looking stuff and really look at yourself, it is an onward journey. Again, it's not tick a box. I've looked at that part of me and job done, it really does become almost like it's an endless cycle, right? Because you learn something else, you realize that what you thought you knew, you didn't actually know anything about it. You need to discover a bit of this, you need to unlearn a bit of this, you need to relearn a bit of this. And it does become that kind of constant. And I think for me, addictive is not the right word that I want to use, but it's the first one that's kind of springing to mind at the moment. But I do think that process can become quite addictive, certainly for me. Like, what else can I learn about myself?
Oh
How
my
can
God,
I get
totally
faster,
right.
better, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know it all. I mean, that's one of the hardest parts of it, isn't it? Is that you'll never know the full answer. You've just got to keep on experiencing life and then understanding it as it applies to you, and then seeing what you want to do about it. And there's, like you say, there's absolutely no end to that. And I think that's a problem for some people. You know, it's easy to get fed up with that and to get put off by that. Or, you know, the flip side, like you said, is to see it as a challenge. Sometimes when I'm coaching people, I say, see it as a game. You know, rather than seeing it's a hard thing to do, see it as a game. Try something and see what the results are. You know, it's like, no one else knows you're doing it, only you.
Exactly. And you do get, again, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I find, again, the more that I focus on this, I will do something that I might have been doing for years, right? But I'll be doing something, and then I begin to question, actually, you've just done that because of this. And start to join all those dots up. So as the awareness deepens and kind of starts to filter into stuff, again, that's where you can start to make, I suppose, some of these micro changes that ultimately will start to lead to bigger and bigger positive changes, hopefully, as you start to make those changes within your life.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like, when I look at it, you know, for me, it was awareness, acceptance, and then action. And they were my 3 A's. So I think, absolutely, awareness comes first. You can't change what you don't know about. And that can be frustrating when you are quite self-aware as a person and you're dealing with people who are not self-aware. That's a challenge. But the second thing is, for me, it was about, okay, I've realized that's going on for me. Do I accept it? Because some things I didn't want to necessarily accept were true. You know, no, I'm really, really a nice person, honestly, you know. You know, and then I don't really do that. I don't get angry in those situations. In fact, I was once told I was a very angry person, and that made me angry because I totally disagreed with that. But I was thinking about active anger, you know, throwing chairs around and things, where it was passive anger that was the problem. You know, so I wasn't aware of that. And when I was aware of it, I had to force myself to accept that might be true. I didn't want to at all. And then I could take some action on it. You know, what do I do about that then? So awareness is absolutely key. And that, like you said, comes through all of this self-awareness work, which goes on and doesn't, unfortunately, even when we know it, my experience again has been that it doesn't change overnight. You know, I don't suddenly go, right, I don't want any passive anger anymore, therefore that's never going to happen again. It's just about management, isn't it? It's about awareness and management of it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. I knew we'd get lots out of today. We didn't know where it was going. Okay, so Victoria, so let's dig into this burnout then, and talk to us when, like, let's start with, I suppose, the when, but when did you experience burnout?
So sort of finale of it, if you want to call it that, was 2015, which is, you know, a fair few years ago now, but still very present in my memory. I remember, I mean, in terms of the awareness of the burnout, that was quite quick. You know, when I look back on it, the build up to it was over quite a period of time, I think, in hindsight. But my awareness of even being in a situation where I needed some help was quite short, because I was in complete denial that there was anything wrong with me. And I was far more happy with the theory that it was everybody else's fault, that I wasn't feeling great, or that things were going wrong or weren't going my way. And I also sort of had this feeling that, oh, it'll be all right, everything will just suddenly snap into place one day and sort itself out, which, you know, didn't really happen at all. I had to sort of hit a wall in order to get things to sort themselves out. But, you know, I was living in that sort of blind denial continually for a long time. And really, I only woke up from that right at the end, when I had an experience where, and this wasn't quite the end, but this was the first step in the end, was I went to the cinema. I'd actually taken some time off work sick for the first time in my entire working life.
Right.
Because I thought that would help me rest and help me just get to the point of understanding what was going on.
Yeah.
Actually, it made it worse because I had lost all my structure. I lost anything to do.
Yeah.
I had far too much time to think. I was using alcohol as a bit of a crutch at this point as well. So obviously, if you're not at work, it gives you more time to use other unhealthy coping mechanisms that aren't good for you. And I went to the cinema one day and I thought, okay, well, this will be a good way to relax, and have a break. And I had breathing difficulties in the cinema. And I just remember not being able to breathe and rocking backwards and forwards and starting to panic quite severely because I'd never experienced anything like that before. And I ended up calling an ambulance. I got rushed off in an ambulance. And, obviously at this point I was crying. I was thinking I was having pains in my chest. So I thought I was having a heart attack.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned probably before, I've got young children. So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to see my kids again. What the hell is going on with me? And I remember the paramedic laughing at me and I was thinking, this isn't a very funny situation to be in. I'm not quite sure why you're laughing.
Yeah.
And he was saying, oh, Victoria, you've got a really strong heart. You're having a panic attack. And I was gobsmacked, to be quite honest, because I thought, a panic attack? That's not the sort of thing that happens to me.
Yeah.
I don't have things like that.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling sort of immense relief, but also embarrassment and sort of almost like an arrogant, that can't be right kind of attitude, because, I'm quite a tough person.
What does the paramedic know, right? I remember the first time I was rushed into hospital, I was like, what does the doctor know? As they kind of talking to me about this stuff. So again, I can totally relate to that, right? This is a paramedic doing their job.
Yeah.
But in that point of burnout, right, you know best, right? This is your body, this is your life, you know about it.
Yeah, and I am quite a tough person, to be honest. This is, I think, one of the things that contributed towards the denial. I have done a lot in my life. I have achieved a lot, and I am relatively resilient, as a person. My friends used to call me Wonder Woman and 100 miles an hour Vic. They were my nicknames, and I used to love that. And it wasn't probably far off true in some ways. I can manage quite a lot of stuff. I had quite an emotionally difficult childhood. I got through all of that. I've had a successful career. I've had kids. I've done well in sports. I've achieved a lot of things. So to not be able to achieve things or to start failing wasn't really in my psyche. And it wasn't something I could really accept. I've always been able to keep going until this experience, always. And this is the one time in my life, and hopefully it will never happen again, that I wasn't able to keep going.
Thank you for sharing. And again, I can relate to, and I'm sure lots of the other guests can as well, about the scariness in that moment. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I think I suppose there's some bits that I kind of want to unpick on that. So I think let's kind of see where we go. So I think initially you'd said it was kind of, you got to that end point, or so the panic, or this panic attack was the start of the end. But that potentially it had been going on for longer before that. So with hindsight, what was happening, or what did you become aware of to make you think this had been going on for a long time? Were there signs? Were there feelings? What had been kind of going on up until the kind of beginning of the end?
So when I didn't know it at the time, but when I look back on it now, I can see what I think happened, which was what you said right at the start. If you want to put it very simply, I lost sight of who I am. And I lost sight of what I want. I lost sight of what makes me happy, what was important, and my values. And the problem with that is that you lead a directionless life. Now, I'm not saying that goal setting, all that sort of thing is absolutely critical, because it's not. It wasn't about that. It was about the fact that, I'm a high achieving person with a lot of energy. And I had nowhere to put that to any good use. So I was just bulldozering my way through life, trying to get on to the next thing, the next thing. But I just didn't know why I was doing any of it, what I was doing it for. And I was putting myself in environments that weren't necessarily good for me. in terms of the impact they had. And as a result,
and when you say environment, Victoria, do you mean workplace environments, or was that coming across in lots of different areas as well?
No, it was mainly workplace. And I'm not actually saying anything about any individual people by saying that. I'm saying it's more about that those environments didn't suit the person I am.
Yeah.
And what happened, and I think this severely contributed to my burnout, is it rather than me saying and making that difficult decision to say that environment's not right for me, it might be right for other people, that's fine. It's not, I'm not criticizing any people here. And moving away from it, I stayed in an environment that didn't work for me, and I changed to suit that environment.
Yeah.
And it made me become a person I didn't want to be. You know, I became very competitive. I became very worried about other people's thoughts of me. I became very defensive about if I was good enough, and all these sorts of things. I moved from being very much a team player to being an individual. It became very lonely.
Yeah.
And that isn't me. It just isn't me. And I think at the end, when you put on top of that all of life's other burdens, like needing some sort of sense of purpose, needing to rest, needing to have hobbies and interests that inspire you, those all slowly slipped away, you see. And all I was doing was really getting myself in this cycle of stress, anxiety, tiredness, overload in terms of work, constantly trying to do more, but for no end goal. There was nothing at the end of it. It was just continuous, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. And that's when I think things like, drinking helps, because you can go, oh, sod it, just switch off.
Yeah.
But that doesn't solve any problems. The problems are still there, just with a headache the next day.
Yeah. And it's the numbing in that moment, right? I think, again, Michelle and I talked about this yesterday. It is, again, I can relate to that. And I think Michelle had said the same. I actually became more social. I'm not an unsocial person, but actually I am an introvert, and I get my energy by being on my own. But it was almost like I was becoming overly social, but actually becoming overly social was the mask, because if I was out, I'd always had this thing that, like, I'm not an in the house drinker. I'll only drink when I go out. And I was in effect creating situations so that I was out and so that I could drink. But if anybody had said to me, your drinking's increased, well, no, it hasn't, because I only drink when I'm out. But I was forcing more of the outwardly and more social situations to give me the excuse to be drinking, because it was numbing. And as you kind of, it was stopping me from dealing with everything that was going on in my head.
Yeah. I think that's the problem, you see, because the biggest obstacle to progress, I think, for me, was decision making. And I couldn't make decisions that were helpful to me. And if you use a coping mechanism, it could be drinking, it could be, some people overshop, some people overeat, some people there's loads of them. That stops you from, or it acts as a way of having to avoid making those tough decisions.
Yeah.
So basically, I was just delaying, having to make important life decisions until I was so exhausted, and literally got to the point of really not even being able to get out of bed, if I'm quite honest with you, Kelly. I couldn't even be bothered to brush my teeth, get out of bed, or do anything at the end. And obviously that's gone far too far, I had to force myself to a place of, quite serious despair, if I'm honest. And I say that word on purpose, actually, because it was an awful experience. When I look at the person I was and am today, and I look at that person, I can't believe it still. Sometimes I think I'm sometimes talking about somebody else, but I'm not. I'm talking about me. To have got myself to that point, was serious. And maybe quite a bit of it could have been prevented by good decision making earlier in the process. But when you said earlier, about the hindsight, I didn't know it was happening. I couldn't see it. No one was talking about it. There wouldn't have been many places I could have gone to get help that I would have known of at the time. And to be honest, I didn't want to accept it. That was the main thing. I did not want to accept it was happening to me. So until I was forced to that point of change, it was quite difficult to do anything about it. But decision making is one of the things I think that's critical in preventing burnout. And the problem is some of the decisions that we have to make to prevent burnout and other things in life aren't the easy ones, unfortunately.
And do you find, again, there's a couple of things there that, so I want to talk about the kind of decision making, but also when you kind of said like the person that you were around that burnout, like you don't recognize that person. I just wonder, because again, I know I've said this, and I know many people that I've spoken to this week, and many people that, you know, that I've been working with for years over this stuff. It's almost like I can literally separate post burnout me, like me who I am today and continuing to change and grow and develop and all of that kind of stuff, pre burnout me, which was, you know, kind of happy go lucky, successful, pushing, doing all of that kind of stuff. But I think I can relate to pre burnout, and I am living post burnout. But yeah, I have a fog around what was happening during burnout, and similar, like I don't recognize, but I can still find myself sometimes, and it's all me, right? The same as it's all you. But I can still sometimes find myself referring to pre-burnout Kelly and post-burnout Kelly, with this kind of hole in the middle of whatever was happening in that darkness.
I get that. I think I'm fundamentally the same person pre and post burnout. What I'm better at now is knowing what's right for me, what's good for me, and making those decisions. Whereas before, I don't think maybe I never needed to for a while find that out. But I certainly didn't know what it was, and I was easily led down the wrong, paths in terms of what was right for me.
Yeah.
So that if I had to distinguish it, I'd probably say, I've gone back to the person I am as a human being, if you like, in terms of my values and all that sort of thing. But with a wiser head on.
And again, I think that's what I realised as well. And again, we've had the conversation. So for me, that is the like who I am at my core. It is that core led part of me, and similarly to you, I can say that in the environment that I was in the toxic environment, I was becoming less of myself. I wasn't aligning my work to my values. I was feeling like I had to change to fit into the environment. Whereas in the right environment, I probably wouldn't have needed to do that. And I could have stayed as the core led real me, in order to, to kind of continue to grow and stuff from there. So thank you. And I want to talk about this decision stuff, because again, it was Julie Turney, I think, that specifically mentioned this in the conversation that I had with her earlier this week. Like, she got to the point also of like decision fatigue. So while she was making some of the decisions that were I don't want to say right or wrong decisions, but maybe healthy or unhealthy, whichever, or just making decisions that felt right in the moment, right? Yours was choosing to increase alcohol and other things, and mine was choosing to increase alcohol and increase shopping and lots of other things. So we can some of that may have been automatic. I don't know if it was necessarily happening consciously. But Julie also mentioned, because I think a big thing that we can see with burnout is that in that fog, we tend to push a lot harder. We're pushing harder. We're trying to prove something. But all of our decisions tend to go into the work. And so if somebody says to us outside of work, Victoria, do you fancy coming for a run tonight? And you did you have a moment, or could you recollect a moment where it was like, trying to decide whether you needed to go for a run tonight was just too much of a decision?
Yeah. I suppose I would have maybe framed it slightly differently. I was in turmoil of indecision, as opposed to decision. I couldn't make decisions. It was almost the opposite, if you like. I would just put them off. I knew there were so many things I knew I needed to do, like get some sleep or eat healthily or take a break, and I just didn't do any of them. Do you know what I mean? I just, maybe change jobs, even whatever it is. I just didn't make any decisions. And that, it's important actually, because burnout, I haven't got to the point of burnout again, but I have periods of time where things like that happen still. Lots of stuff happens, and you think, I've got to make some decisions here about what I'm going to do. And my natural inclination is still to go, oh no, leave it till tomorrow. Leave it. And I have to tell myself, you can't do that. If you keep doing that, you're just going to end up back in a mess. Not necessarily burn out again, but down an unhelpful path that isn't going to lead to a productive and happy and healthy life, you know. So but I would say it's more for me, it was all about I just avoided everything towards the end, you know. So it wouldn't have been a decision, I just wouldn't have been put in a position where anything would have come like that to me, if you like. I withdrew a lot towards the end. I didn't want anything to do with anybody, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, withdrawal has been a common theme as well. It's a tough one. It's tough, isn't it? So we get to, with you, we get to the point, you're in an ambulance, paramedic is saying to you, you're having a panic attack. You're saying, don't be so stupid, I don't have panic attacks. What then? Yeah, I know best. Of course, you know, I'm not a trained paramedic, but I know that this is not a panic attack. But from that moment, what then happens? What changes for you? What do you do?
So, to be honest, I didn't take that episode seriously enough because of that denial still. You know, I'm fine. You know, he told me I'm fine. That's all okay. The turning point for me, if I'm going to be totally honest, was when I realised that I was having an impact on my children.
Okay.
A negative impact.
For me. Yeah.
And that I won't go into how that was brought home to me, but it was. And luckily, I had a light bulb moment. I just had a light bulb moment where I said, this can't happen anymore. And I took some time out to get help. Like, not time out for work just to sit at home and be miserable. I took time out to go and get some help, and it worked.
And what did that help look like, Victoria? Was that professional? What did that look like?
It was a mix. It was a mix of rest, no drinking. I haven't drunk since, actually. So that's 7 years or so now. Yeah. It's brilliant. One of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So it was rest, it was exercise, it was healthy living, it was some professional help in terms of talking. And that was interesting because I didn't grow up in an environment where you talk about how you feel, as I think is probably true for quite a few people. So I was very reluctant to talk about myself. But once I started talking about myself, that didn't stop very easily. I found I had quite a lot to say.
Why did you think that needed to happen? Was that somebody else saying to you, you need to go and talk to somebody? Or again, was that just like an inner or a decision that you made? I need to talk to somebody.
I needed help, and I couldn't do it for myself. I realized that at that point. And it did work. You know, I found that as soon as I started getting things out of my head and to another place, things started to make more sense. And that, you know, that's why coaching's so effective, isn't it? We get it out of our heads and we get it into some sort of conversation with somebody else where you can be encouraged to make positive decisions. And that's what I did. So I changed my I've got, since that period of burnout, I have 4 steps that I take into account every single day. The first one was my physical health. So that's what I did. You know, I call it my HELP plan because it's HELP. I think I've told you about it before, but I still use it every single day. So the first thing I sorted out was my physical health, because that got my energy levels back up. Then I looked at my emotional health. So that was the talking, the understanding why I respond to life the way I do, why this has happened, and then the bigger picture around how we, you know, how our emotions drive our behavior and all that sort of thing. You know, self-awareness. And then it was the L is the learning. So, you know, okay, that's not, like you said, it's not enough. It's not a one-off event. I have to keep at this all the time, you know. So what am I going to do to keep learning about how to look after myself, how to prevent burnout happening again, how to live a better life, all that sort of thing. And then the P was, so I did all of that. Great. I feel better. You know, I'm understanding myself, you know, I'm learning lots, but I still didn't know where I was going. So the P was purpose, you know. So what are my values? What are my priorities? What do I want to achieve? And that process, it wasn't called help at the time. I just did that. I've called it help since then. That was just the 4 steps I went through when I look back on it on hindsight. And I still use them. You know, that just changed the way that I live my life completely. And it's so easy when I look at it now to think I can just check in with those 4 things every day. You know, am I okay? Am I looking after my health? How do I feel emotionally? Is there anything I need to sort out? Talk about, am I responding to things in a way that I'd rather not? Do I need to learn anything? Do I need to do anything? And, you know, am I making decisions? Am I acting in line with my priorities, my values, and all that sort of thing? Really helps. That last one has really helped me with decision making, because when you're very firm with your values and your priorities, then you have to force a decision in line with those if you're indecisive, which I can be. So that last one has really, really helped. And I remember someone saying to me, there's no such thing as a right decision. It's just a decision. There's no right or wrong. And that's helped a lot as well, because I do think sometimes we have a big fear of missing out. And, you know, if I make that decision, I might lose out on something else. You know, I might have missed an opportunity there or something like that. And that sort of guidance really helped me just think, no, it's just a decision. It's like that film Sliding Doors, isn't it? Yeah, your life goes one way or your life goes another way. Yeah, and you'll never know what would have happened had you taken the other decision. So you can't know if it's a wrong decision.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But also, I think recognizing the decisions that you make today do not have to be the decisions that you make tomorrow or next month or 6 months from now. As you said, it's making the decision to make the decision and to move forward with some action. But actually, if it, you know, you can make another decision tomorrow. You can make another decision in 6 months' time. You know, if you decided tomorrow that actually you did want to have a glass of something, that might be the decision as it is there. If you decided that you wanted to change career, then that's the decision that you're making at that time. And I think lots of us get into the thought of, and again with that sliding door moment, of trying to second guess. If I make this decision, this might happen, this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. And we don't know, right? We don't know what the next thing is because there are already so many factors. But just taking the decision and the action can be it. And I love kind of, I think I've reframed it for me, but just thinking about like experimentation and having fun with stuff, you know, just trying with something. Again, well, I've talked to lots of different guests this week. It's come up in conversation about meditation, right? Some people have worked out it doesn't work for them, and some people have worked out it does. Trying different exercises until you find the one that works for you. Trying different sleep habits until you find the one that works for you. Trying different learning methods until you find the one for you. You know, if we look at it as experimentation until we find the right thing and put a bit of fun and enjoyment into it, again, we're not making decisions, you know, we're not failing at learning or failing at a yoga class or, you know, whatever it is it might be. You know, that's not failure, actually. That's just not for me. I'm going to go and do some kind of martial arts or multiple marathons, if you know anybody that's doing that, Victoria. You know, it's like, you know, it's like we find the thing that works for us and we keep going with it.
Yeah, I went to a yoga class once and fell asleep.
Clearly what you needed in the moment, whereas I know I just don't function properly if I don't do my yoga every morning. I should try it again. I just don't. Whereas I couldn't do the running that you're doing. Because actually that it just doesn't work.
No, everyone's different. I think that's really important. No, what works for me will not necessarily work. I think the parameters can work for everyone, but the detail has to be down to you. Because no one has the right to say what's right for you or for me. We can guide, we can help, we can give experience, but you've got to make those ultimate decisions, I think, and for yourself. I'll tell you though, you know, one thing it has done, this whole burnout period for me, which I'm very grateful for, because I did think this was the worst thing to ever happen to me at the time. Now I see it as a really helpful stage of my personal development as a person, is I'm just a lot more confident as well as a person, because I'm okay with me now. I wasn't okay with me before, and I am now. And if I am surrounded by other people who I don't agree with their values or I don't like their approach to something, or I don't let it affect me personally anymore. I can step back and say that person can be whoever they want to be. It doesn't need to impact who I am. And that is really helpful in particular work environments, as well as in a personal environment, because I don't need to be influenced by the people who are surrounding me if it's not something I want to be influenced by. I wouldn't necessarily have had the confidence to do that before, but I definitely have now. And that would probably be one of my biggest takeaways from the whole experience, is the confidence to be yourself and to not let other people impact your values. So just to give a silly example, you know, when I see people not sharing in work or not acting as team players, that doesn't stop me now still being a team player, even if that person is not being one. Whereas before, maybe I would have gone, well, they're not doing this, so I'm not going to do it either.
Not going to do it either.
or, you know, they're rude to me, so I'll be rude back. You know, I just, that just doesn't even feature anymore. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. No, I'm quite happy with understanding who I want to be today. That is a big weight off my mind, and that makes me very happy. That
I love that. Thank you. And I suppose just on that, the level of confidence that you have now, because I think it's important to talk about some of these timeframes. Did you just kind of, I suppose, come through the burnout and just be like, hey, I'm more confident, or did that take time to uncover, discover, rediscover?
Yeah. I think when you've been to a very bad place, when you start feeling well again, you do get sort of a pink cloud confidence.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, wow, I'm better. And I can do all these, because you can start doing things again that you couldn't do. You know, I had a massive energy rush. You know, I was like, oh, I can start doing these zillions of things again that I used to be able to do. So I sort of had that sort of, you know, fake confidence, if you like, again at the beginning. But I think the sort of more wisdom-led confidence has come over time when I've actually started to realise that the stuff that I've done, the stuff that I've learned, and the way that I live my life is right for me.
Yeah.
And actually, the more, and again, we said about it, didn't we, earlier, it's practice. The more I have lived the life I want to live and been the person I want to be, and I've been okay with that, the more confidence I've had to carry on doing it. So I think there's a sort of pink cloud confidence at the start, but I think that the longer term, more settled confidence does come over time. But you've got, all change comes over time, doesn't it? This is why there's about a zillion books on changing habits, isn't there? Because no one sticks to it. So you have to read another book on it. So I don't think it's any different to any other area of personal change. You can't be confident overnight. You just have to stick with it, believe in what you're doing, and then you just recognize the results here and there when you see them. Suddenly, I'll just suddenly think, oh, yeah, I was fine there.
Yeah.
You know, and it'll just register bit by bit. So, yeah, definitely a process.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Just one final question then before we bring it to a close. What do you think people need to know about burnout that isn't widely spoken about?
So I think that more people are probably close to having it than anyone accepts. Could be one of them. It's interesting, actually. I've met quite a few people where I think if I was in a closer relationship with this person, I would probably talk to them. But it's not my place in this particular instance to ask them questions like that. But you can see it in people. I always think the eyes are a big giveaway. I mean, they're the mirror to our brain, aren't they? And you know, I think I can see potential burnout in quite a lot of people who would probably like me, you know, complete denial, think they're doing fine, but are probably struggling. So I think that's one thing. I think we have to stop worrying about what people think more, because stigma is a big issue. You know, part of me, there's a little part of me still saying, why am I telling all this to a live audience? You know, actually the bigger part of me is saying, I don't care. Actually, I'm quite confident with what's happened, and I'm glad it's happened, and I'd like to share the story and help other people if I can.
And I'm grateful for you sharing.
Me too. But there is still a small part of my brain saying, should you be doing this? You know, so there's going to be that going on, you know, so the more we can do to remove stigma, the better. And I think it's educating people on the signs as much as possible. You know, it is, you know, that my signs of burnout were so obvious. I mean, they couldn't have got more obvious, and I still didn't see them. So the more that we can educate people on the signs, and because even if I could have broken the circle of some of them, maybe I would have made a difference. But I let them all carry on without getting any help. So yeah, those three spring to mind, but I'm sure there's more.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's okay.
Oh, Victoria, let's draw that to a close. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, you and I know that we can have these conversations all day, every day. As I think, as we said at the beginning, we could probably both have filled a week talking about this individually. If people want to find out more about you and what it is that you're doing, where's the best place for them to get hold of you or find out more about you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Or you can email me at vhall@trymakingsense.com. But if you Google me, you'll probably find me on socials. The website is www.trymakingsense.com as well. So it's all kind of linked there.
Perfect. And am I right in thinking there's also a book title with the same name?
There is, yeah, I've got it here actually, because I was having a little flick through before our
go.
session. I'll show you. Look, making sense. The reason I can't get it on there. There you go.
Here we go.
The reason I was flicking through it actually was not to be able to do that, because I didn't know you were going to ask me to do that. It was because you forget. And I think that's just the last thing, you know, even though you've been through it, I was saying to you, wasn't I, at the beginning, you forget some of the stuff that's happened, and you have to sometimes remind yourself of it, because if you forget, you've got the danger of it happening again. So actually, I flipped through the book before the session just to remind myself actually of some of the detail of the events leading up to the period of burnout, because it's good to remember. It's good to remember in order to ground ourselves back to where we want to be.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Victoria,
Thank
huge
you.
thank you for me. Thank you for booking your slot. Thank you for taking part. Thank you for being as open and honest and sharing in the way that you have done. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been
for those of you, thank you. For those of you that are watching, if you, again, share your comments, share your thoughts, share everything that you can with the hashtag This Is Burnout. We said we need to keep these conversations going. We need to be educating ourselves, raising this awareness, and doing everything that we can to prevent this. If you want to find out any of the other ways that you can get involved with This Is Burnout, if you want to watch any of the replays from any of the conversations this week, listen to any of the audios, or just kind of find ways that you can be doing more things for yourself to help you to prevent burnout, head over to kellyswindler.com. You'll find all of the details on the This Is Burnout page. There's a big banner on the homepage of my website. So kellyswindler.com, you'll find all of the details there. I will be back I think I'm back at 2 o'clock this afternoon with Taz Thornton, and then final wrap up from me. So the learnings and the lessons from this week, I will be sharing with you at 3 p.m. this afternoon. But now I'm going to go and switch off, get myself a little bit of tech-free time, but I'll be back with you at 2 p.m. this afternoon with Taz Thornton. See you again, and do give Victoria a follow, and do go and check out her website. I will be back with you all later. Don't forget the hashtag This Is Burnout. Thanks very much. I'll see you all soon.